Hi, Booktube, Amy. I'm back here reading from the private papers of a bankrupt bookseller, and today we are on page 114, beginning with Books for Children and so forth. A book for a boy was one of my inquiries today, and as Christmas approaches, I will have to fill up my stock. As usual, a picture of my responsibility comes before me. My choices and recommendations will influence the future in ways unintelligible and unimaginable. A life of Clive may make a boy a soldier. The Swiss Family Robinson may send him to be a planter in the South Seas. A life of Kelvin may make him a scientist. The life of Henry Ford may make him a great individualist. These are big responsibilities, and I feel them all. For boys of 14 and thereabouts, I am all for giving them biographies. Plutarch's Lives for Boys and Girls at one end is a good book, and at the other, why not Samuel Smiles' Self-Help? Monkeys we were, and monkeys we remain, imitative creatures. Let us have the best examples before us while we are very young. My own youth was greatly stimulated by a good illustrated edition of Aesop's Fables. They made me feel an interest in the beasts and helped to awake sympathies with the brutes I might otherwise never have felt. Dent's Everyman edition is good for adults, but a pictured edition, I haven't one just now and don't know of one, is the best for youngsters. Fairy tales are not what they were. Andrew Lang's collections were the best I know, but nowadays the boys and girls want books on motor cars and aeroplanes, books on adventure and pluck and peril, and these are readily available. Personally, I can't read them, and I often wonder who write them. They are undoubtedly popular, I know that by experience, and that proves that publishers like Nelson's and Blackie's, for example, who make a specialty of the children's book business, know it better than I do. The draper shops sell more at their bazaars than the booksellers sell, and perhaps that is as it should be. These books, with titles such as The Wolf Runner by E. Cooper and Smiths of Silver Lane by Ethel Talbot, make me feel that I know nothing about books. The A. Milne books, for all their success, affect me much the same. I am no more able to select and buy such books for children with discrimination than I am able to buy Prams or Pagorics. The truth is that the books I and most folks think are good for children's books are really books for ourselves. Alice in Wonderland is a wonderful wonderland for children, by all means, but it is not comprehension. The mind that revels in Alice is an adult one, as witnesses the gallant Osborne in that new play Journey's End. To him, the wonderland of Alice is a garden of delight into which the fortunate visitor may escape from the too terrible realities of existence. All the folks I have met who, like Alice, are grown up and intellectual. To call it a child's book is to bring truth to the prophecy. Except ye become as little children, ye will in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven. Alice's Wonderland was a veritable kingdom of heaven in the wilderness of the later Victorian era. It even won Victoria herself. She loved Alice and ordered from her bookseller. Who were the royal booksellers? Bumpus or Hatchards, I suppose. Any works by Mr. Carroll. It is not recorded what Her Majesty thought of the other works of C.L. Dodgson on mathematical subjects. Another favorite of mine, which I have sold as a book for children, is Cautionary Tales by Hilary Belloc. It is a work of genius and stands in the same honorable catalogue as Alice. The fact is, grown-ups buy quite a number of books which they allege are for children, but which really are for themselves. Alice is one, Cautionary Tales is another, and I'm sure Gulliver's Travels and The Pilgrim's Progress would very rarely be bought by children for themselves. Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare is another. I see I am disclosing myself. I have no real sympathy with children's books. I am proselytizing all the same. I want my customers, children or adults, to read the books I like. I am a pontiff in such matters. I ought to cultivate Catholicity although the high organization of Catholicism in itself has its index expurgatorius, so I am not too abandoned a sinner after all. The most regular buyer of children's books I have by Scott, Dickens, and Stevenson. He says the best boys' books, and he has tried them on his lucky dogs, are The Talisman, The Tale of Two Cities, and Treasure Island. They certainly are a good trio, and now that copyright is out, I might make the suggestion to the publishers who favor omnibus books. They would make a good omnibus for boys. The Crusades, the French Revolution, and the Pirates of the Spanish Main are subjects that all proper lads should know. If one wanted others, I would suggest a Kingsley omnibus. Why not Hereward the Wake, Westward Ho, and The Water Babies? For girls, I have no wise matron whose opinion I could seek, but I will venture my own. Louisa M. Alcott's Little Women would be first. Lots of girls like it. My second would be The Mill on the Floss. George Eliot is always good and is surely due for a revival. My third would be modern, and after a thorough look over my stock and my catalogues, I give the palm to Dorothea Moore. I am sure girls like her books. They know her titles and ask for them. That is the mark of adoring faith. The older generation of girls' books has passed away, but I remember the affection Mrs. Molesworth, Rosa N. Carey, and Annie S. Swan, who now writes for the moderns. These were good in their day, and still now and then I sell second-hand copies to dames who would renew their youth. Good ABC books do not exist now, but they ought to. It is a defect. I learned my zoology from an alphabet book with splendid pictures, the like of which I cannot find today. A was an ape, and all apes to me are descendants of that first ape in the Garden of Eden of my youth. Anu I never would have known but for this work, for I have never seen one or heard of one. Yet G, which might have suggested goose or goat, brought me through this book to the GNU, which the Oxford Concise Dictionary in one line most concisely dismisses as GNU, ox like antelope, Hottentot. The Ichneumon is another creature I have met but once, and then right early. The compiler of the book knew no other creatures who were so egotistic, so I went to the Ichneumon, and my stores of learning have been permanently enriched. Other alphabets might be made if the idea appeals to publishers as it appeals to me. There ought to be a series of alphabets. The alphabet of the Bible, beginning with Aeneas and finishing with Zacchaeus, would be an easy one. The Z gives no serious thought, and Xerxes might be introduced for the X. The alphabet of common things, beginning with apples and going on down to zoo, would be a valuable introduction to the wonderful world for many minds. Then why not, in these anti-militarist days, an alphabet of the wickedness men call war? It would begin with armistice and end with, most appropriately, Zeppelin. The exercise is a pleasing one. I must address myself, I repeat, to the publishers. They would find me most helpful in their search for fairy gold. These quoted words are from the decorated title page of Granny's wonderful chair. This is a fairy gold, boy, and 'twill prove so. The dearly beloved Dent has printed them to introduce Frances Brown's book. The book is worth buying, for the memoir of D.R. Frances Brown was one of the heroines. Memoir by D.R. Frances Brown was one of the heroines. Born poor and blind in Donegal in 1816, she climbed to fame and achievement over every obstacle. Her forgotten novel, My Share of the World, would be worth recovering. One of the characters finds life intolerable and turns to suicide. Of her, she writes, when the burden outgrows the strength so far that moral as well as physical energies begin to fail, and there is no door but death's that will welcome our weariness, what remains but to creep into that quiet shelter? But morbidly though Frances Brown could write, there is no morbidity in Granny's wonderful chair. It is as good a fairy book as I know, and it can take its place with those popular aliens, the Brothers Grimm and Hans Andersen himself. Each year sees the old favorites, Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, and Jack the Giant Killer, revived with appropriate pictures. They will do for uncles who have 3 nephews, or nieces who seek to discriminate none with special favor. They are a happy lot, and it would be difficult to tell which of the three is the most dearly beloved. The Dr. Dolittle series are not to be ignored, and there is also Little Black Sambo. Few great men of literature have written deliberately for the young, but Rudyard Kipling is a glorious exception. The Just So stories, The Jungle Book, and Stockley and Co. are all in the highest class, and the history he wrote with C.R.L. Fletcher is calculated to make proud Englishmen. The official neglect of Kipling always seems to me an outrage, but then William Shakespeare was never poet laureate either. This, amid much that disappoints and disgusts, including, I have always thought, the Kipling Society, is one of the consolations of Kipling. He loves and understands England and Englishmen too well to expect too much. I write on, and I have nothing but rambling thoughts on books for children. This writing about books under rough classifications is a task for my trade. I want to confess to myself, as Emil did in his Soul and Pepys in his Diary, it gives me confidence. I have given thought, though it be ever so little and entirely irrelevant, to the question of what books I ought to have for children. It is good. All work, even the great failures like creation itself, have had pronouncements said over them. I say no less of these pages of pencilings. It is good. There is no other critic, very fortunately, but myself, and tonight, complacency conquering, the verdict is with me. Good night books, I have just said. I had carried back a pile of children's books, some like Eric or Little by Little and A Peep Behind the Scenes, which I have not yet, would like to have, written about. I have carried them back into the shop. It is late. A few people are in the street. I hear their patter past the door, and the overhead fan light of which is open. The shop is lit only by the street lamps without. Good night, books, I repeat as I close the door of my room behind. My reviewing of children's books has made me, for all my heresies, more childlike tonight. I could almost kneel down, long and incongruous, and pray by my bedside. What hinders me? A sense of humor? A sense of the ridiculous? No, Thomas Hood is right, for now 'tis little joy to know I'm farther off from heaven than when I was a boy. And I think we will leave it there for today with just that reading of books for children and so forth.